I've started the process of stripping the chassis, although some of the things have already been stripped off it anyway. At this stage I've just removed the differential. Wasn't too bad. There's a few missing pieces. The U-bolts holding the differential to the spring, some of those are missing. So at some stage it's all been undone and not put together properly. But I should have enough parts with the spares cars. There's a little bit more to take off. Front suspension, most of the front suspension's there, or once again there's a few linkages are missing, and I'll take all those off. At this stage I propose to clean the chassis off mostly outside here, because I'll grind all the old paint off and loose rust and blow all the dirt out. When I've got it cleaned up reasonably well, then I'll transfer it back into the garage, where I'll do some finishing cleaning up and also repainting the chassis. Some repairs I assume I'll have to make. I noticed that there is actually a crack on the mounting for the lever arm shock absorber there, so I'll actually have to re-weld that. Won't know what else I find until it's cleaned up. So once again, very dirty job, but eventually it'll be all cleaned up, ready for painting. Having taken everything off the chassis, I've set about stripping any bits of rust, paint and so on off the metal. Now I've chosen to do this manually using very large sanding disc, a needle hammer to help remove any rust pits and so on, and finally with a very heavy wire brush on an angle grinder. Now, not as good as perhaps sandblasting, but to sandblast I'd have to send it away and also find someone that could do the job properly. Best probably process would be to have it dipped, but I don't intend to do that either. The mechanical removal takes time, dirty process. What you need to do, of course, is seal up the metal with a rust preventative solution. So I've used a rust converter, and it will hold. I mean, this chassis lasted 67 years odd, and I expect it will last now another 67 years before someone has to consider even doing this. Having said that, maybe it won't even need to be done for much longer than that. Mechanical removal is good enough, particularly in Australian conditions. It doesn't get salt corrosion and so on, so it should be fine. Next thing I'll do is to actually spray this up with a chassis paint. At the moment it's upside down, but I'll do chassis paint next, turn it the other way up, finish spraying it, and then I'll probably use some form of solution inside the chassis rails where I actually can't get paint, to further preserve the metal. I've now completed painting the chassis. I had originally intended to spray it with a chassis paint, but on reflection I decided against that and actually used a paintbrush and epoxy rust guard. Now, the reason I did that is because of the design of the chassis. It's got a lot of sections that you actually can't get into with a spray gun. You can't get the spray gun down there, and it's a lot easier to actually get the paintbrush and poke it in through the holes, and you can actually manage to get most of the chassis done. Obviously there are still some sections, probably internal in here, that I'll have to spray a bit of some form of preservative into the inside of the chassis, the same along the rear end here. You can't get even a paintbrush in there very well, so I'll actually get a little spray can of something and a rust preventative and spray it inside that. It comes up alright. I put very thick coats of the paint on. It takes a long time to dry, this particular epoxy I use, but it will end up providing a pretty good barrier against any future rust. I've now brought it back into the garage for the first time in quite some time, and it's now ready to start assembling components onto it. So from this point the chassis will start to be rebuilt. I'll probably start with the suspension and then work towards building up the engine and putting the engine in as well. So it will stay in the garage. Eventually it'll be on wheels. If I need to wheel it out, I can wheel it out. When I'm working on it, I'll use the original jacking system just to support it instead of these particular stands I've got at the moment. So at this stage, that is this part of the restoration is complete.